really excited to chat with you. So I'm very happy we're doing this finally.
Yeah.
And, you are someone that I immediately resonated with when I read your story and just kind of like tuned into your vibe. As someone who's gone through a genuine spiritual awakening
Yeah.
and is still going through it, this undoing process. And so I'm really excited to hear it firsthand and also to extend that to the community so they can get to know you better and hear about your journey from that direct experience. Um,
Yeah.
so this is a really light, informal, friendly chat just to highlight you and your journey and what you do, and most importantly, why you do it. Um, so it will be very unagendaed outside of that loose structure.
Perfect.
So let's begin with you and your story. I know you had quite a profound awakening experience in 2003.
Yeah,
So would love to start there and kind of lead into that.
sure. And feel free to interrupt me as I go along. um, yeah, in 2003, I was in my late 20s and I was big into yoga. Yeah, I was teaching a lot of yoga. I was practicing a lot of yoga. And I had no familiarity with Kundalini awakening, nothing. I'd never heard of it. I knew about Kundalini yoga, but I had never gotten into what Kundalini awakening was. So I, I would like to say that I just was invited into an experience because I was not looking for it at all. But I'll just get started with one day I was teaching a class and I was walking down this long hallway. And I mean, as I talk about it, it's almost like I can just put myself right there. But I put my hand on the door to go in to teach, and I had this very interesting shift happen sort of in my middle. I would call it now the solar plexus, but at the time it just felt like the center is moving. And it immediately was like, what is that? You know, I've never felt movement inside my own body. So it was strange, but I kept walking in to teach. And I'm going in there and I'm teaching, and all of a sudden this movement is starting to kind of move up through the middle of my back, like coming up my back. It's energy kind of forcing up my spine, and I'm teaching the class. I'm guiding them through poses, and this is all happening at the same time, right? And I'm, you know, you wouldn't know it. Nobody knew this, but I'm sitting there going like a witness in my own head going, what is coming up my back, you know? And then it just keeps pushing up and comes up the back of my neck. It's coming up the back of my head, over the top of my head. And I'm starting to get like really hot. Like I was teaching in a room of 100 degrees. So I was in that room all the time. It was always hot, but it felt like an internal volcano of heat, just a heat that I was like, what is going on? You know? So it's this inner kind of eruption happening. I'm still leading people through class going, what is going on? And then it feels like electric, right? Like some kind of electric energy coming in my head. I'm starting to see like maybe a little hazy. I'm thinking, am I going to drop right here on the ground? Like what is going on? You know, it almost felt like I was going to enter another realm, you know, and I'm thinking, what, you know, so finally it got so intense. I feel this pulsing all over my body, just crazy, you know. And I finally got to a point where I had to sit down, and a dear friend of mine happened to show up this morning at 6 a.m. to take this class, which she never does. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Do you think you could take over? I'm not feeling that well, you know? And she takes over, and I'm calmly leaving the room, and I go back into the office, and I just lay on the ground in total shock. Like, what was that? Those were these three words that just entered my head, and I had no clue, you know, just this streaming movement. And at the time I didn't know what was happening. So I just felt like in that moment, what is moving through me? I feel this, I mean, and I had done yoga for a long time. So, you know, when you're in meditation, I would feel kind of a vibration, but this was on a level that I just was freaked me out. You know, it's just like, what? Yeah. So I guess at the time I was immediately like, there's something wrong with my body, right? So I'm calling the doctor, go in that day to just say, hey, I tell her this whole experience, and she just looks at me like, you know, Like I'm great. You know, she goes, I've never heard of anything like that up the back. And I was like, oh, this is good. I'm in a good environment. But she through and does the general, takes some blood work. And, you know, in my mind at the time, I'm like dead set on there's something going on in the body. And so anyway, long story short, nothing shows up. And from that moment on, I like to say that was just the moment where my whole life just changed. Everything changed. From that point on, I started experiencing all kinds of symptoms throughout my whole body, all kinds of electric, tons of stuff going on in the head to make me think there's something wrong in the head, like all the time, you know, just felt like somebody was doing surgery in there. And it's like, what is happening? So I was in and out of the doctor a lot, and they could never find anything wrong. I started taking my health into my own hands because they're not finding anything. So I'm like, well, I'll just start eating better, alternative people, acupuncturists, energy, all kinds of stuff, right? And nobody can really kind of give me any insight into anything. My acupuncturist was like, you know, your pulses are totally normal compared to what you're telling me. And he was somebody who recommended, he brought up the idea of Kundalini. You sound like you've got like a Kundalini disruption. And there happened to be this guy in Boulder at the time. I lived up in that area then. And I went to see him for a while and told him what had happened. He said, you know, it sounds like a lot like Kundalini. And so he worked with me with meditation and this kind of stuff. And it was great, but it didn't stop. It just did not stop what was happening to me, you know? So eventually it's just like you feel like you're on your own. You know, you tell your experience to people, you tell them all these symptoms you're having. And at the time, I'm also starting to have a lot of other things in my mind starting to open. I'm starting to feel very expansive states, that kind of stuff. I started to have heightened sensory awareness where all of a sudden I'm like a magnet to my environment around me. I just can pick up on everything, you know. So it wasn't just this physical thing. It started to open up in my head, and I started having dreams that were just unreal. I had probably 3 to 4 years of dreams that started off very evil almost. Like in the dream, I'm being pulled up walls. Like just imagine you're being pulled up to the top of the ceiling and thrown around a room. Wow. And I would look in the mirror dream and see like evil demonic faces, like very crazy, wow. Right? So freaked me out. But then over time, these dreams transformed into like healing dreams. And this recurring theme of a man who would show up in a dream, like a silver-haired man, you know, like a wise man. And he would be there guiding me through, you know, learning how to see like light coming out of the hands, learning how to see blockages in the physical system, showing me how to like be in two places at once. Like, and this is all happening in the dream state, right? Kind of like a lucid dream. And then there came a point where I would go through portals, like portal travel. I'm landing in other realms in the dream and seeing all these different beings, and just got crazy. You know, every night I'd wake up and be like, what the hell is happening to me? And but that was reassuring to me because nobody could really help me understand what was happening. So just seeing that I'm having all this physical stuff, I'm having heightened sensory awareness, I'm feeling a lot of energy all the time. And I'm also getting this insight in my dream state that I'm going from a very scared feeling right into something else happening. It was actually very reassuring to me that there's something deep going on here. It wasn't just like, oh, you have a neurological problem or something's happening to you. And I knew that, I think from day one, I always knew something was happening. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't understand it. It was just like I felt like I had no say in the matter either. It was just kind of pulling me along. So looking back, and this happens for a period of like several years, right? Several years ago. And I was newly married at the time when it happened, and my husband and I start having children, and I end up having 4 kids in this process. So I've got this happening. I've got small children, Then one day I noticed that this I call the observer just like pops out in me.
Mm.
And I'm suddenly now seeing myself like I'm looking, not that I'm looking at it from a distance, but I'm in myself being able to see that that's a personality, you know, that's a personality that's not me. And how is this actress talking? Like that's how it felt. And I would just wonder sometimes, how do the words come out of its mouth? Like that's how it was just the strangest thing.
Yeah.
It never failed. I would always talk and things would come out, but it really had this huge presence. Like it was just there all the time.
Mm.
So what I didn't know at the time, I had no idea that I was going through these different stages, right? But when you're in them, right, you're flailing along like lost at sea and you have no idea. So I didn't, in the middle of it, I'm freaked out most of the time. You know, I'm not comfortable with this at all. And I mostly was not comfortable with the amount of energy that would continue to flood my system. It was so hard. Even to this day, I still have lots of energy and I've learned how to manage it, but it's still a thing, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like it just left me. But so what I didn't know at the time was that this was all leading me to another massive shift in my awareness that I had no idea was coming. And Cam, if I knew it was coming, I would have jolted to the other side of the earth. You know? I would have been running as fast as possible, you know.
Yeah.
So one day, I have 4 children at the time. I'm coming home from a trip, my parents' house. I'm driving on the highway headed north. And all of a sudden, I get this feeling inside of me. I was used to feeling vibrational fields in myself, so that was normal. But all of a sudden, I feel a shift in the center of my head. I'm driving on the highway. I'm thinking, this is great. And it's kind of internal. Like, if I imagine it, it felt like it was in the very middle of my
Like
head.
the
Kind of,
pineal gland?
probably. I mean, that's where I would
Yeah.
say. I have no evidence to show that, but that's where it would feel like, you know. So I'm driving and it feels like a pressure, like a balloon is blowing up inside of my head. And there is no pain involved, but it just keeps pushing and expanding and expanding and expanding. And I'm going, it's going to burst. Like I could tell this thing is going to blow. And as I drove, it just pushed, and it just went pop. Like it just expanded out. And I felt myself go from like a visual field that felt like tunnel vision. And all of a sudden, my visual field just went wide. And I immediately pulled the car off the highway, right? I got to get off the highway. And it was just, I was flooded with information coming in the third eye area. And I sat there on the side of the road and I felt this energy go through me like a rolling pin, just rolling down my chest, pushing down my abdomen, down my arms, down the legs. It was like, I've never had Rolfing before, but that's kind of how I would feel. It was just this really pushing energy through my whole body. And I just sat there going, you know, you've got to be kidding me. What is happening to me? You know, I was so distraught over the whole thing, you know. And luckily now I can just say it. It was so many years ago, you know. But so after that incident, my husband and a brother came and helped me get home safely. But I noticed I was very different after that. Everything that I saw and the way I was experiencing the world was dramatically, radically different. And I just couldn't figure out what it was. I couldn't put my finger on what was so different. You know, why was I feeling so different? What was it? What was it that was different? And it hit me like several months later. And I thought to myself, the observer's gone. There's no more separation between me being in. It was like I felt like I just became this huge vastness. And in that, I felt like there was no center point in me. You know how you have a feeling of when you reflect back inward on yourself, or there's a reference? I felt like just blown, and I didn't know where I started or ended. And I was just everywhere, like in an ocean. So You can imagine that is the nervous system is going to be flooded, right? It's not used to that. It was like going on fight or flight, like what is happening, right? I mean, that was the reaction. So it just took me a really long time. I really could not go out much. I had to surrender and just stay home with my kids. I would try to step out into anything, big box stores are like my least favorite environment, but I would step in anywhere and just feel like I was all over the place. And I couldn't at the time, I had no tools. I had no skill set. I had no idea how to feel separated from anything, because that's what was so different. Before, I felt like I was a solid person in a solid body, like you feel you're there, I'm here, this is this table that's sitting here. But I felt like that all left me and I was just all of it. And it was just very strange period of time for me. Very hard, And
And
so I just
what year
stayed home.
what year was that? Just out of curiosity. Like I want from the first was 2003, and
Yeah.
then
So
the when the blow up happened.
the blowout,
Yeah.
I like to call it the total explosion. 2011. So
Okay.
8 years. There was 8 years of time where I was still functional in the world and going through a lot and thought it was at the time, it was hard. But then once I had the head shift, it was a totally another level of just
Okay.
a totally different experience. It's still to this day, I don't think I do it justice explaining it. I'm looking for words that just, I try, but
We all
I
try.
don't know. It's a strange thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I ended up just isolating for a long time. I kept thinking I just need to go live in the woods or, live in a hut somewhere. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to have a family, like I don't know if I can do the mom thing with all these kids. And even though I was doing it at home, and then I got into a period of severe darkness, a lot of really deep darkness. Fear was born on a level that was just, it was like watching the ego completely freak out, just like a fear of just terror would hit me out of nowhere. You wake up in the morning and there's just terror and there's nothing physically harming me,
Yeah.
but almost like that, that side of yourself that knows it's sensing it's like not it, right? And it's like sensing something else. If I kept having all these very expansive experiences and feeling like I was kind of in this limitless, boundless feeling, that side of your mind doesn't really, it's panicked almost about that because it's not part of it really, So it was a real battle for so long. But it also gave me a real opportunity to learn about fear and see it up and personal. I think there's a lot of maybe misinformation on fear. People say, well, don't go to it. It's horrible. And it is when you're in it. But I think when you see it, it gives you an opportunity to see what it's about. And the ego's terrified of its demise, ultimately. So then it all makes sense. Then it can kind of bring some calm. But when you're in it and anybody going through it, it's horrific. You feel,
Yeah.
don't tell me to laugh at it now because I'm crying every day. So yeah, that's kind of, I ended up staying out of the world maybe for 5 years time.
Oh,
I really
yeah.
didn't do, I go for walks and have help and that kind of stuff, but I was not living, we're not going on trips, we're not going out to eat with my husband on date night, I'm not doing any of that. So as you can imagine, that started to weigh on my marriage, weigh on my kids. And then it almost came to a point where you just have to make a decision. Am I going to sit here and hope that there's some miraculous thing that I'm just going to have an epiphany and all this is going to be fine? I'm still at home with my kids and I'm still having lots of download type frequency come in through the head. I mean, it doesn't matter where I am, it's still happening. And there was a part of me that just didn't want to accept it. I just wanted to resist it as long as I could. I didn't want to learn how to deal with what I was experiencing, what I was feeling, what I was connected to. There was a huge block there for a long time. But eventually I realized that if I don't do something, if I don't learn, if I stop this resistance and just realize that this is not a problem in your life, because I saw it as a problem. This is a problem. I have all these limitations, and who wants to live like that, right? But I realized that no, this is I need to learn how to work with the energy that. So 1 foot at a time, I slowly started back out, and it took a long time. It took me several years to really get comfortable again. And it was like, it's a weird thing because you know how to live in the world. Like I know how to, I mean, and I look totally normal. That was the other thing. Because you're going through this thing inside that you're shifting in such a dramatic way. And I would say things like, do I look all right? Like, I don't, something's going on. It was this recurring thing because, you look in the mirror, it's like, you don't see, if I was really ill, I think I would start looking really, really ill. Something would be wrong.
Yeah.
But it was a hard thing for my mind to sort of wrap around for a long, long time. But, I eventually call it reemergence. I eventually just kind of felt like it came full circle, was pulled out of my mind, pulled out of the world, pulled out of everything, and then sort of really pulled it back in, into more, I call it like a spiritual grounding where it's just in your humanness, but you're doing it in a brand new way. It's just totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. The rebirth.
Yeah. And it's a lot. And I still learn all the time, but it was a wild, wild roller coaster for a long time, but I'm happy to be where I am now. Thankfully.
Oh, man. So yeah. So like where you are today, how do you feel in this moment? And your state of being, your state of consciousness. Where's your level of peace here and now?
I feel like I trust 100% that I'm always guided, right? So I always feel this connection. And when I say that, I feel it physically. So I, that's what took me a long time to get comfortable with because it was so different than I had ever felt before. I mean, I had moments as a child where maybe I felt some things, but it never lasted permanently. This is like a permanent thing. So I feel like there's always this place inside, this connection, and I know it's there. And even when I get caught up, I have 4 teenagers, life gets a little weird sometimes. But I know it's there, it's not leaving. It's shown itself, over and over. And I just always go to it. It's like I really have learned that it doesn't really matter what's going on the external world. I mean, we can get so caught up in got to save everything. And I get it. There are so many things in the world that look horrible, right? But on the other hand, it's like, but unless you have this strong connection within yourself, there's nothing outside that's going to change, right? I mean, nothing. So I think that's where I am now. I just stay kind of present with where I am. And I still have moments where I'm not comfortable in environments and I know it, but I'm not, the fear is not like it was years ago where I was just like a petrified child, trying to maneuver. So
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
content and relaxed and okay. Like it's okay. And I, looking back, even though it was like over a 20-year period of time, which seems like people go, wow, that's like, really? That all happened that long? I don't think I would want to go through it for that long. I'm like, well, I didn't either, but that's what happened. And so you learn to accept things as they are, that's the other thing. And obviously it was meant to happen because it happened.
Right.
So
Right.
even though I didn't want I didn't want to go through all that. Like my mind was like, hell no, we're not doing any of that. Eventually, just like you surrender, you let go and trust that you're in the right place at the right time, and there's something greater going on there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Do you have teachers or people that you can point to that have been guides on your path throughout this journey that you kind of see as, those that have helped you perhaps in terms of how to navigate this all?
Yeah. Well, I was drawn to A Course in Miracles right away. I mean, my mom had given me the book in the
Yeah.
1990s, and she said to me, I got this book for you, and I think you might need it someday. You know, and I always took it with me, but I never opened it
Mm.
until I hit like some serious fear. I really got into the course, and it really helped me make a lot of sense of what's going on in the psyche, you know. So that's first and foremost my favorite spiritual text if I had to pick one. I really love David Hawkins, and I loved his levels of consciousness and
Mm.
kind of physical part, because I know he had a struggle physically for a while. So that was very reassuring. And then I came across a woman who's not popular and she's not living any longer, but her name is Bernadette Roberts.
Mm.
I don't know if you've heard of her.
Not her, no.
You'd like her. But she was like in a convent when she was young. She's Catholic. She's raised in Catholic, and she's got a beautiful take on awakening and takes it to a level that, wow, I have not read before. But she has a couple books called Losing the Self, An Experience of No Self, and some others. They're not popular. Like if you got on, it's a real small little website, but she's a beautiful writer, and she had a very intense experience, and it was amazing to read for me.
Mm.
But that would be my top. And then I also had a mentor psychotherapist that helped me tremendously. I did talk to somebody regularly that really helped with that, the mind and that kind of thing really helped me a lot. So for anybody that goes through stuff, I highly recommend finding some kind of somebody that gets it, you know, because it's a hard journey on your own, you know.
Oh yes, it is. And
Yeah.
and I share your struggle to put words to this in a way that could accurately describe the experience, because ultimately what we're describing here is indescribable. So you can't you can't do it justice no matter how much, and ultimately we're just pointing to the truth and
Right.
um the signposts, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard. It's the hardest thing in the world to try to explain something that has no language and no boundary. And yeah, you really can't. So I don't try.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm rereading A Course in Miracles right now. It's on my bed.
Oh,
I'm second time around, but
yeah.
it too for me is perhaps the most uh, just I call it the bazooka of spiritual text, because it really is just so profound, and the fact that it was channeled
Oh, I know.
by Helen, who was an admitted atheist and just kind of like someone that was completely
I know.
like non-interested in all of this, and it's just the most true text to come about. Just adds to the validity of what is
Right.
beyond. And so for me too, that is what I see as my guide, to help.
What's interesting, if I can comment on Helen, what's interesting there is like she's a clinical psychologist in the middle of New York City,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's very telling that you're in the middle of chaos, right? The biggest city in the country, the
yeah.
chaos.
The heart of the ego,
Yeah.
as I say.
And brought to her in the middle of that, which is again, I think it's so symbolic, right? It's telling you you could be anywhere. It doesn't matter what's happening outside. It can be, and this is duality. It's crazy all the time. So, but you can still find the peace in yourself. It doesn't matter where you are. And I think that's so cool that happened, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, maybe sometime we can get on a podcast about it or something. We can kind of
Yeah.
geek out on ASIM,
Yeah.
because
I all the time. I love it. I just think it's the best.
yeah, we're actually starting an ASIM group in Awakenpedia in the
Oh,
community.
cool.
We're gonna do monthly circles on it, because I think it could benefit a lot of people on the path. So,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
so yeah, we'll be talking a lot about it. But
Yeah.
anyway, I want to kind of channel this conversation into how this entire experience you had, in this multi-decade long journey of awakening, and kind of this fundamental shift in consciousness that helped you to come into connectedness with the divine, how that's now led into what you do and what you offer as an extension to the world. Can you talk a bit about kind of what your offerings are, how you package these things,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Right now, I have a weekly podcast, comes out every Wednesday, and a weekly blog. And there's lots of information on there. It's all my first and foremost primary motivation is I want to help people. I want to help people that are struggling or just curious, on all levels of awakening. I never in a million years thought I would do this. Like that was not on the radar at all. So, but as it happened, I really felt like I could never find like somebody who had such a physical tough time. I could never find it. So I thought I want to put this out there and just help people that may be struggling with the same thing. So that's kind of where my heart is. I really passion to just help others that need help. So I have the podcast and blog. It's just free. Get on and listen to it. My website's at livelikeeden.com. I named it that because I have a real connection to the symbolic meaning of the Garden of Eden. I don't think it's necessarily literal, but I think of Eden as just the symbolic place of our home and God in our mind. It's like a memory. And so when I say that, the whole show is about connecting to your inner divine self, right? And that everyone has it. It's not something we're looking for out there. So that's the name. And then I'm offering one-on-one guidance for anybody struggling, and to the Awakenpedia community, a free session if anybody out there is struggling. And it's totally catered to the person, right? I mean, everyone has their own unique path. I don't think any two paths look the same.
No.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm at. And I just want to help educate, bring insight to things, because I think our culture is lacking. It's kind of a rite of passage, right? I mean, it's something that I think you look at like shamanic initiation. I don't know if you've ever looked into that, but these things used to be kind of known in cultures, and our culture is just it's not mainstream, right? I mean, it is a little bit, but when you get into the nitty gritty of it,
Yeah.
so there's
No.
only so much they want to talk about, Kim. Right? So that's just kind of where I'm at, where I was led to. I feel like I had a personal education on it myself, just walking it, and that's where I'm coming from. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. It's you radiant authenticity, and it's such a pure signal that I'm feeling and receiving from you. So
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I have to be honest. I'm just a normal person, right?
yeah, yeah,
I'm
I
living
know.
in the world like everybody else. I have a family. We've got a lot of chaos. So, I'm not kidding. I'll get off with somebody will call me and it'll be like, what story are they coming up with now?
Yeah,
So I feel like you can have this beautiful connection to your spiritual self, but you're still here. You're still living in the world, and life is going to happen no matter what, and
yeah,
it's all about how you do life, how if you stay connected or not. And when you don't feel connected, you can always choose again the next time,
right.
so that's the
Yeah.
yeah.
It reminds me of Ram Dass-esque, where he talks about the great challenge that we all face as pilgrims on this pilgrimage to simultaneously balance this dual existence we find ourselves in
Right.
of being human,
Yeah.
part human, part being, and not, walking this tightrope that we are as a human being, and not losing ourselves in either dimension totally. So
Right.
the art of enlightenment is about being able to experience the fullness of our humanity while also knowing the truth of who we are. And
Yeah.
that's what allows us to play and to actually experience the playground that the world is, so that we can learn, so that we can evolve, and ultimately so that we can return home.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, and the way you describe it, I think of it as, it's like you have one toe in the other world and or one foot, I should say, and one foot here, and you're just bridging this gap.
Yeah.
And so I like to always say it's like you're connected to something greater, but you're living your practical life as a human being.
Yeah.
It's just like you said, it's a balance. It's a fine-tuning process.
Yeah. And can we bring all of the being that we are into all of our doings as a human?
Right.
So can we bring the love into
Yeah.
humanity and transform that fear to come back into life. So it's a great challenge. It's
Totally.
a great challenge, yeah.
Well, and everybody's walking a tough path. It's like we're all going to have our challenges. And when you have something in your life that has been difficult for you, it's a little easier to have compassion and empathy for other people. If you haven't, it's a little harder. It's easier to judge and think you might know what somebody else should be doing or not doing. But when you've been through the ringer yourself, your heart opens up into a place where you just feel for other people. And you never know where people are. They might look like everything's great, but it may not be great. And so how can you extend your own love and compassion for other people, I think is huge.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point, Lindsay. And how also that, um, as someone who perhaps has either crossed the bridge or is in process crossing this bridge, or, right, bridging the gap of these two dimensions, you remember what you felt like and what life was like in the asleep state, the unawakened state, and the torture of and that suffering, and also how much you believed what you were seeing or doing was true.
Oh,
So like you have the compassion for those who are still really stuck in illusion.
right.
From the more awakened state, you can see them and be like, you can forgive them for their illusions, right?
Yeah. They just don't see it yet.
And that's
I,
why our
yeah.
Father says, forgive them for they know not what they do.
Mhm.
And that's a really powerful way to live in that
Yeah,
sense.
it is. Well, and also to the contrary, if you're going through something really, other people around you don't understand it, right? They don't understand you. That happened to me. It was like people would be supportive, like very, very supportive, but just they don't understand it. And I was like, I totally get it. Like I would have never understood any of this until I was thrown into the water,
Yeah.
Like I get it. Like I understand if people don't get it. Yeah, it's fine. It's all fine. It's all in good time.
Yeah, and that's where it's when the student's ready, the teacher will come. And that's why us as whatever name you want to give us, like light workers, the awakening souls, um, all we can really do is be the teaching, be the light, be the presence, and when those are ready, it will catalyze their awakening. And you are your own guru, right? Like you are your own healer. We can just perhaps again point to the way.
Yeah,
And
it's like holding space.
yeah,
Sometimes you just hold the space. Sometimes you don't really need to say anything either. You just kind of feel it.
yeah.
But there's many ways to work it, I guess, isn't there?
Yes. Well, beautiful. I think it's coming to a place to wrap this up,
Yeah,
Lindsay, but I like to ask as a way to as a concluding remark, if there's any type of wisdom or guidance or insight that you would like to share and impart on the community, um, anything that's arising from your heart in the moment here about what could perhaps help you or have helped you, when you were earlier in your journey, or just something that you feel can help guide those on the path.
I have something come to mind. I think this is a big thing with any kind of transformation, and especially if you've read somebody else's account, okay? It's easy for the mind to want to grab a hold of somebody else's journey or somebody else's epiphany, or how it happened for them. And the mind will then sort of want to say, well, I'm waiting for that for myself, right? Like what I'm doing, I'm grabbing a hold of somebody else's journey and waiting for that moment for myself.
Mm.
Instead of realizing that, oh, it's my own, like there's something that I need to figure out on my own. And it may not look like it did for that, you can read a lot of different stories, right? It may not look that way. And so instead of trying to grab a hold of what you think it should look like or what you think it's supposed to be like, you realize that it is the way it is in that moment, and just wrap your arms around where you are, that you're always being guided where your own unique path is taking you. And ultimately, I think it's the same place in the end for all of us, but it's going to look different in the dual world for sure.
Yes, yes. And beautiful advice and so important. And in many ways, it captures the essence of what I foresee Awakenpedia speaking to, serving to, in that there's many paths up the mountain that all lead to the one universal summit.
Right.
And the road you take is what's unique to you based on your own unique energetic vibration. And those roads can be reading A Course in Miracles or yoga or EFT or
Right.
hypnotherapy or Reiki or one of these other dozens of vehicles that help us to realize who we are. But they all are bringing us to the same realizations of who we are. And so, yes, can you kind of let go of that mind-made grip of like, oh, this is how you awaken. This is the
Right.
path. This is what you have to do. And then getting upset that it's not happening to you.
I know.
Right.
It can be, you can put yourself into a nightmare that way.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you realize the ego still has it's trying to grab a hold of something that it can't possibly grab a hold of. So it's kind of a trick.
The ego is very tricky, very clever, very the most clever of all. Like it's the
It is.
grand illusion itself, and
It is
it will
the
it
master
quicksand.
game, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Well,
Okay. Well, beautiful.
I want to thank you for putting this together. And it's so cool to have a community of people. I think it's awesome. So kudos to you and best of luck. And if you need any help, certainly reach out. I'd be happy to help you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It is in many ways just the beginning of this beautiful unfolding and a life's work that we all share is the one
Yeah.
true work that we're doing here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just foresee myself, my role. I don't see this as mine. I'm just kind of like steering a ship here and trying
Yeah.
to keep it free of ego and
Right.
straight in there and pure and truly helpful to the world and to humanity and facilitating other people's awakenings and their healing journeys back to love, to oneness, to God.
I think it's a great idea. So
Yeah.
best of luck. I mean, just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy.
All right.
So
Yeah. Well, everyone who tuned in, thank you so much. If you'd like to learn more about Lindsay, you can check out her profile in our member forum where there's more about her bio, direct booking links, special offers, all the good stuff. So, Lindsay, thank you so
thanks,
much. And
Cam. It was so good to meet you.
yeah, all right,
Have
we'll talk soon.
a, okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.